Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I eased myself behind the wheel, the cruiser's engine ticking as it cooled. Midnight draped over Antelope County like a heavy blanket, and I felt the familiar knot in my chest tighten. The radio crackled. Another abandoned vehicle on County Road 14. Headlights still on, engine off, doors locked. I rubbed my eyes long past the point of clear thinking and flicked the siren briefly, more out of habit than necessity, before pressing onward into the darkness. The road was a ribbon of cracked asphalt bordered by cornfields that rustled as the wind picked up. My headlights carved twin beams through the night, illuminating rows of stalks that bent and snapped, echoing like distant whispers. I pulled up beside the SUV, a dark green Ford Explorer, its hazard lights blinking in the gloom. Gravel shifted under my tires as I stepped out, flashlight in hand, breath puffing out in short bursts. The crunch of gravel under my boots sounded unnaturally loud. Explorer. Plate Nebraska 4 BAX 913, I muttered to myself, voice hoarse. Doors were locked, windows dark, no engine noise, no sign of anyone inside. I tapped the window, nothing. I radioed dispatch. 1034, I've got an Explorer abandoned on CR 14. No occupants in sight, no obvious damage. Checking for identifiers. Static responded. I skipped the polite pause. Dispatch, acknowledge. No answer. Only static, the radio's heart still. I circled the vehicle, flashlight scanning every inch, the license plate, the dent in the rear, bumper, the muddy streaks along the side. I reached the driver's door, breathing steadily, and pried it open with the universal key. The lock clicked with a reluctance that set my nerves on edge. As I slid inside, the interior smelled of stale leather and coffee grounds. A crumpled paper cup lay half under the passenger seat. I crouched to peer below, the glove compartment ajar, papers scattered. A driver's license. Name, Daniel Foster. Address, Rural Route 2, Oak Grove. Phone number rubbed off by constant handling. I sat back, chest tight. A missing person, maybe? I clicked the dome light. Nothing. I checked the rearview mirror. Faint smudges where someone had gripped it. Loose gravel crunched behind me. I spun, flashlight in front. Empty fields. Nothing but the sway of corn and the distant hum of a tractor's engine, though work should have ended hours ago. I stepped out and walked around the rear. There, in the dirt, fresh footprints led away toward the southwest. Boot prints, wide, heavy. I radioed again. 1034 to dispatch. I have footprints leading off CR 14 near mile marker 7. Proceeding on foot to follow. Stand by for possible pursuit. My flashlight beam bounced as I stepped into the field. Gravel crunch giving way to soft earth. The corn stalks arched overhead, aisles narrowing, forcing me to duck low. The hush was oppressive. Every breath sounded like thunder in my ears. My boots sank in mud, pulling at the straps, slowing my progress. The footprints were fresh, no more than an hour old, maybe less. Whoever left them knew this field well. The path was direct, swift. I surfaced at an old wire fence, rusted strands taut against weathered posts. The boots slipped under in a practiced crouch. Beyond, abandoned barns, rotten boards sagging, their silhouettes yawning like open mouths. My light flickered against peeling paint and fractured glass. Through a hole in the siding, I saw crates stacked high, the faintest scent of grain still clinging to broken planks. A soft click echoed. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my grip. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out the hum of cicadas. Before I could turn, a broken beam shifted above, raining splinters down. I ducked, palm stinging. Shards of wood rained around me. I gripped the beam, twisting it aside, heart hammering. The beam cracked again, harder. I shoved with both hands, adrenaline tipping me forward. The beam gave, swinging away to hush against the barn wall. I backed out, flashlight sweeping. The interior was empty. Dust motes drifted in my beam. I heard a faint drip. Water from a leaky roof hitting rusted metal. My chest tightened. I raised the light to the rafters. Nothing but hanging wires and cobwebs. Then, behind me, the diesel hum of my cruiser's engine. I whirled, flashlight slicing the darkness. The SUV's headlights glared through the broken barn slats, engine idling. I cursed under my breath. Someone had started it remotely. My radio crackled. 1034, you okay? The familiar voice of dispatch. Relief washed over me, replaced instantly by unease. I'm fine. I found the Explorer. I'm investigating a barn off CR14. Backup's en route, came the reply. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes was all I needed to vanish. I slipped away from the barn, retracing my steps under the corn canopy. My boots slid in mud. Wet tendrils of corn brushed my arms. Every shadow seemed alive. Leaf-shaped specters skittering at the edge of vision. I heard the radio static again, low and mocking. I reached the fence line, ducked under, and sprinted across the asphalt back toward my cruiser. The SUV's door swung open as I drew near, headlights bright, engine still idling. No one in the driver's seat. I slammed the door shut, heart racing. Gravel sprayed as I floored the gas, fishtailing onto the pavement. The radio burst alive. 1034, respond. I thumbed the mic. Dispatch, I'm getting out of here. Suspect vehicle is compromised. I'll meet backup at the junction with Highway 81. Later, at the station, lights on low, the hum of fluorescent bulbs muted. I sat at my desk, staring at the Explorer's plate on screen. The database showed Daniel Foster missing since sunset. No signs of foul play at his house, no signs of any struggle. I ran the license plate again, heart still pounding. Foster's photo blinked. Young guy, mid-30s, easy smile. I closed my eyes, a soft rap at my door. Deputy Ramirez, eyes cautious, handed me a scrap of paper. Found this in the break room, he said. I unfolded it. A list of names, mine at the top, written in neat script. Then Foster's, then two others I recognized. Marjorie Holstead, the widow on Ridge Road, and Agent Harmon's number. My breath caught. The writer had been in my station. Someone had been watching us. I looked up. Ramirez was gone. The hush of the station pressed close. I slid the paper into my pocket and left, heading for the lot. My cruiser sat alone, windows fogged. I circled it, flashlight scanning. Under the driver's door, handle, scrawled in black marker, "They're closer than you think." I pressed my palm against the cold steel, fighting the urge to break open every door, check every camera. But deep down, I knew. Whoever had left that message was already inside my mind. At home, I couldn't sleep. The bed felt too big, too empty. The hum of my neighbor's TV leaked through the walls. I lay still, wondering how many eyes tracked my every move. I reached over, palm grazing the cold handset of my radio, always on. I clicked it on. Static hissed. Then a voice, soft, familiar, but not mine. Quiet nights make the loudest memories. I eased the cruiser onto the blacktop of Junction Road, headlights cutting through a mist that drifted off the fields like drifting ghosts. My pulse throbbed in my temples as I switched off the engine and climbed down from the cab, service weapon heavy at my side. I'd barely slept, but adrenaline sharpened my senses. The call had come just before 2 a.m. A silent alarm at the old Harper farmhouse, abandoned for years but recently occupied. Neighbors reported flickering lights after dusk. I walked to the front gate, the metal hinges protesting in rusty squeals. Wind tugged at my jacket, carrying a faint scent of decaying hay. The porch light above the door didn't flicker. It was off entirely, leaving the threshold shrouded in shadow. I drew my flashlight, clicking it on. The beam revealed peeling paint, dried mud tracked in past storms, and footprints too fresh to ignore. I radioed dispatch. 10:34, I'm at the Harper place. Silent alarm, no lights, but someone's been here. I'm going in. Static answered. Then the dispatcher's quiet. Copy that. Backup en route. Backup, 10 minutes. I pushed the gate open and felt the cold grip of dread tighten in my gut. Every patrol taught me to respect the unknown. At night, even a harmless barn cat could spell disaster. Inside, the air was thick with dust. My light traced the edges of a sagging porch roof, then slid across a cracked window pane. I hesitated. This wasn't my call, officially. But as Sheriff Keller's deputy, I'd learned authority cuts both ways. I obeyed his rules, yet I knew when he'd let me chase shadows for my own virtue. I slipped inside through the front door, unlocked, ominously swinging against the nausea in my stomach. The living room. Floorboards bowed in the center. Framed photographs hung crooked, though the images had faded to sepia. A rocking chair swayed gently, though no breeze stirred the still air. My light found footprints leading from the chair across a threadbare rug toward the back hallway. Behind me, the radio crackled, then died. My stomach twisted. I clicked it, but only hiss returned. I shoved the handset into my belt, couldn't rely on it now. I followed the prints down the hallway to the kitchen. The fridge door lay open, its dull interior lamp off. I stepped in, shining my light over scattered cereal bowls and an overturned stool. The phone on the countertop had its cord severed at the base. Whoever was here didn't want calls going out. Then I heard the soft scrape of boots on wood behind me. I spun, light lancing across the room. Nothing. My boots shivered against the lino. I swallowed, voice low. Show yourself. Silence. I circled the island, shining my beam into corners. The cupboard doors, in perfect condition, stood shut. No sign of forced entry except the cut phone cord and that rocking chair's betrayal. My back prickled. I crept toward the back door, reached for the handle, and stopped. A shape moved outside through the dirty window. I slammed the door shut, hand pressed against the cold wood, and swallowed hard. Come out with your hands up, I called, voice steady though my heart pounded. This is the sheriff's department. No answer. The shape shifted. Too tall to be a child, slender. It stepped back. Then it was gone. I reached for my radio again, dead. Fingers trembling, I placed my ear to the door and heard nothing but my breath and the low moan of the wind through broken shutters. Decision. Stay quiet and wait for backup, or chase whatever stalked the farmhouse. My gut said wait. My conscience, carrying the duty of every soul in Antelope County, said act. I eased the door open just enough to slip through, weapon raised. The night air wrapped around me, colder than inside. The porch board sagged under my weight. I edged toward the tree line, flashlight sweeping across hay bales stacked near a lean-to. Behind them, saw a shovel half buried in dirt, and fresh soil piled at the base, as if someone had been digging hours ago. My breath caught. Hands tight on the flashlight handle, I crouched low and crept forward, boot heel barely making a sound. The remains of an old hog carcass, long since picked clean by scavengers, lay next to the shovel. I jerked back, my stomach knotted. The realization hit like ice. Someone was composting bodies out here, hiding evidence in the manure pits. A twig snapped. I spun, flashlight lancing across the yard. At the edge of the beam, a dark figure ducked behind the barn and slipped away. "Stop! Sheriff's Department!" I yelled, sprinting after. The ground was slick with mud. Boots sank, silver moonlight glinting on rivulets of water running off the roof. I lunged past the barn corner and froze. The figure stood at the far fence line, backlit by distant highway lights. In its hand, the crooked handle of my own baton, stolen from the cruiser. I swallowed, realization flooding me. The intruder knew me by sight, had watched me suit up, strap on that baton, maybe even cataloged my patrol route. The grip on my weapon loosened as dread gnawed my insides. Before I could call out, the figure slipped through a gap in the fence and vanished into the cornfield. I pounded after, corn snapping in my path, flashlight beam bobbing. I called his name, "Hey, Daniel Foster," but the rouse swallowed my voice. I emerged onto the road, chest heaving. No footprints, mud washed away by a sudden gust. Only silence. I stumbled back to the cruiser, hands slick with sweat, and slammed the door shut. The radio clicked alive. 1034, are you okay? I pressed the mic. Dispatch, I'm okay. It's someone was here. They had my baton. I started the engine and peeled away, tires spitting gravel. As I passed the farmhouse, the porch light flickered on, briefly illuminating the window. Inside, a silhouette stood with my baton raised as if to strike, and then the light went out. My eyes burned from the glare of my headlights, adrenaline still coursing. I slammed the cruiser into gear and sped toward Highway 81, all too aware that the night still held secrets I couldn't chase, and that whoever haunted these roads was 2 steps ahead, watching every turn I made. The cruiser's tires hissed over wet asphalt as I followed Highway 81 back toward town, heart still pounding. Dawn was hours away, and the fog thickened into curtains that swallowed the beam of my headlights. Every oncoming vehicle felt like a threat. Each pair of headlights a pair of watching eyes. My fingers drummed on the steering wheel, shaking with adrenaline. I kept replaying the sight of my own baton in that figure's hand. Stolen from my belt, taken by someone who'd studied my movements. It wasn't just a crime, it was a message. I slid the cruiser into the sheriff's department lot and killed the engine. The only sound was the hum of fluorescent lights through the station windows. I sat for a long moment, breathing ragged. Finally, I opened the door and stepped out into the chill. Gravel crunched under my boots as I crossed to the front entrance. Inside, the reception desk was empty, phones silent. I flicked on the lights, then headed to the armory. The safe door stood open, my baton gone, along with 2 spare sets of handcuffs. Someone had come in while I was gone. My radio crackled with static. I clicked it off. Backup wasn't coming fast enough. I grabbed the patrol jacket off its hook and pulled it on, feeling the weight of the badge that had become more curse than honor. I checked the logs, no unauthorized entries, no alarms triggered. Whoever got in had known the codes, the patrol schedule, and exactly when I'd be out chasing shadows. I ducked into the briefing room, where the whiteboard still held the day's assignments. Foster's name circled in red ink, the farmhouse noted beside it. Underneath, a hastily scribbled note. watch your back." I drew in a shaky breath and grabbed a marker. I wrote beneath it, "Do not trust anyone." Then I erased it, swallowed, and left the board blank. In the hallway, I passed Deputy Ramirez returning from the locker room, rubbing his arms. He gave me a nod. "Long night?" I forced a tight smile. "You could say that." I slipped past him, not trusting my voice beyond that. I made my way to my office. The door was locked, so I punched the code. Inside, the heat of the small space wrapped around me. I closed the door, checked the bolt. I sat at the desk, stared at the bullet-riddled target poster tacked to the wall, old training. Beneath it lay my service weapon, magazines, and a handwritten list of calls from the last month. Abandoned vehicles, silent alarms, missing persons. Each line felt like an accusation. On impulse, I opened the top drawer and pulled out my notebook. Page after page detailed every odd call I'd answered. Next to each entry, I penciled a question mark. Why was someone setting these traps? Why now? I flipped to a blank page and wrote at the top, "Strategy." Then I drew a single column listing what I knew. Explorer abandoned on CR-14. Footprints into cornfield, no follow-up. Davidson's silent alarm at Harper Farmhouse. Signs of digging graves. My baton and cuffs stolen. Note, they're closer than you think. Beneath that, I left blank space to fill later. A knock on the door made me start. Agent Harmon poked her head in. Dark circles under her eyes, coffee stain on her collar. "Mind if I come in?" she asked. I exhaled and nodded. She stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. She lifted the edge of my notepad. "I saw your list," she said quietly. "You're planning." I set the pen down. "I need to know who's behind this." She placed a manila folder on the desk. Inside were surveillance photos. Grainy stills of me exiting the barn, then the cruiser, then the station at odd hours. She pointed to one image, me at the farmhouse at 2:15 a.m., flashlight sweeping behind me. "Someone's watching you, Marcus. This goes beyond a corrupt sheriff. This is personal." My throat tightened. "You think it's Keller?" She bit her lower lip. "He's in custody. They arrested him last night. By dawn, he was in Lincoln jail." She paused. "But I've been reviewing voice recordings from his standoff." He muttered something about a partner. My stomach dropped. "A partner?" She nodded soberly. "He said, 'You knew this was coming, didn't you? You always had my back.' And then he laughed." I swallowed hard, hands clenching the edge of the desk. "So, they set those traps. Used Keller's pattern to scare me." She leaned closer. "You're dealing with someone who knows Keller's playbook, and yours." In the silence, I felt the station close in, walls narrowing like the barn rafters. The badge on my chest felt as heavy as a millstone. "What do we know about Keller's partner?" Agent Harmon shook her head. "Nothing concrete, but I found this." She pulled out a scrap of paper, the same type Deputy Ramirez had found. Names, including mine and Foster's and hers at the bottom. She laid it next to my notebook. The ink was the same neat script. I traced the lines with my finger. "So they're tallying me, too." She stared at me. "They're testing you." My breath came fast. Outside my window, dawn's first light bled pink across the sky. It should have felt like relief, but it only deepened the ache in my chest. "I need to find Foster," I said, "and whoever's behind this." She stood, slipping the folder into her coat. "I'll run down Keller's associates, see if any names match. Be careful." I nodded. But as she left, I realized I couldn't trust anyone, least of all myself. Because whoever had orchestrated this knew me, my routes, my fears, my limits, and they were playing me like a pawn. I stared at the empty chair where she'd been. My reflection in the window looked pale, drawn. I almost didn't recognize the man staring back. Then I saw it, on the glass, smudged by a wet hand. The single word I hadn't written but felt echoing in my mind: watch. I pressed my palm to the window, heart pounding, and whispered, "I see you." Outside, the parking lot lay empty, mist curling around the street lamps. I stepped back, hand reaching for the radio, but it stayed silent. I sank into my chair, shoulders slumped, and watched the dawn rise. Because daylight brought no safety, only new shadows and fresh traps waiting to spring. And I knew, with a certainty that tasted like steel, that the most dangerous game had only just begun. I turned the key in my office door twice, each click echoing in the silent hallway. The morning sun had bled into the windows, but inside, the shadows clung stubbornly to the corners. I shut the door behind me, locked it, and leaned my back against the cool wood. My head throbbed, but there was no time for rest. I retrieved my patrol map, unfolded it across the desk, and tapped the inked routes with a finger stained by coffee. Route 14, Junction Road. CR 12 by the Old Miller Dairy. Every stretch held another unanswered question. I grabbed the radio and tried again, static. The handset felt foreign in my grip. I shoved it into my pocket and reached instead for my phone, eyes flicking over Agent Harmon's number. I tapped her name, but thought better of it as the line rang empty. She was chasing her leads. I was on my own. Across town, the Harper family's land stretched for miles. Fields of stubble from last season's wheat, broken fence posts leaning into the soft earth. I rolled down the window, the cold air slicing through the cruiser's warmth, and navigated toward the Miller Dairy Road. My mind raced over the scrap of paper from Ramirez and Harmon, the list of names, a tally of targets. Foster, Holstead, Harmon. Me. Who was next? I flicked on the dashboard camera. 2 days of grainy footage stared back. Me at the Explorer, me at the farmhouse, me slipping into the barn. My reflection ghosted across every frame. I turned it off, watching myself that closely felt like surveillance from someone else's eyes. My cruiser slid down Miller Road, headlights illuminating rotted silos and rusted feed troughs. At the end of the lane, the dairy barn sat squat and silent. The air smelled of manure and stale hay. No signs of movement since the last time I'd been there, but something about this place had gnawed at me since childhood. Tales of late-night deliveries, of cattle trucks disappearing into the fog and never returning. I parked and killed the engine. Silence draped heavy. I stepped out, pulling my coat tight. My boots sunk in muck, and I felt the invisible weight of eyes in every direction. I clicked on my flashlight and approached the barn door, the wood swollen by moisture, groaning under my push. Inside, the beam fell on empty stalls, ropes coiled and rotted, feeding buckets overturned. I swept the light upward, to the rafters where old tools hung, but saw no fresh footprints. Then my beam caught a smear of dark red on the floor. Blood. Fresh. I crouched, hand tightening around the flashlight. The smear trailed toward the back, where a small side door stood ajar. Hollow wind whispered through it like a warning. I drew breath, pressed an ear to the door. No sound except my pulse. I yanked it open and spilled into the night air. Beyond lay a narrow paddock enclosed by sagging wire fence. In the middle, a circle of straw disturbed as if something large had been dragged here. I flicked the beam across the ground. Footprints. One set armored in heavy boot treads, another small, narrow, like a woman's work boot. 2 people here recently. My radio crackled to life. Static, then Harmon's voice. "Marcus, you there?" Relief and dread tangled in my chest. "I'm at Miller Road. Found fresh blood and 2 sets of prints. 1 male, 1 female. Help's 5 minutes out," she said. "Stay safe." I hated waiting. Cold seeped through my jeans. I scanned the paddock. At the far edge, a rusted cattle chute stood. Inside it, a single glove lay on the ground. Black leather with a silver snap. I picked it up. Inside, the lining was damp. I flipped it. Scrawled in white was a single initial, F. Foster. I slapped the glove into my pocket just as headlights swept across the paddock entrance. Harmon's unmarked SUV rolled up, engine humming. She jumped out, weapon raised. I nodded, then turned my beam toward the straw circle. "There," I said. "Something's been here recently." She strobed her light across the ground. Then she froze. "There's a fresh hole," she said. I bent to look. A shallow pit scraped into the dirt, straw tossed aside. My stomach clenched, hollow. Almost too late, I realized. Someone had buried something here, then returned to dig it up and move it. I straightened, voice low. "They're cleaning up." Harmon slid beside me. "We need to call it in." I shook my head. "Number?" "We're drawing power to this spot. They'll watch the transmissions." She exhaled, eyes scanning the fence line. "So what then?" "We wait," I said. "Hide and let them come to us." She nodded, slipping behind a feed trough as I crouched behind the chute. My pulse roared. I clutched my weapon and counted off seconds in my mind. 10, 15, 20. At 30 seconds, headlights appeared again, creeping down the lane. A sedan this time, headlights dim. I glimpsed a dark silhouette in the driver's seat, thin, tall. The vehicle slowed, then stopped 10 yards from us. The beam illuminated the area, searching. My chest constricted. Adrenaline sharpened every sense. I raised my flashlight to the width of my shoulders, shining it at the sedan. The engine cut off. The silhouette moved behind the wheel, reaching. I didn't know if they were grabbing a weapon or fumbling with the door handle, but I reacted on instinct. I stepped out, gun raised. "Freeze! Sheriff's Department!" My voice cracked through the stillness like a gunshot. The sedan's door clicked open, and a figure stepped onto the ground. Slender frame in coveralls, hair pulled back, face hidden by shadow. They stood still, bearing no weapon in sight. I kept my aim, sweatshirt trembling. "Hands where I can see them." They complied slowly, lifting pale hands to shoulder height. Then the porch light from the farmhouse across the field flickered on, illuminating the figure's face beneath the brim of a baseball cap. The last thing I expected, it was Harmon. Her eyes were wide, strange. No fear, just a hollowness. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. I lowered my weapon fractionally. "Lisa, what?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out my baton, flipping it in her hand. "You always thought you were in control." I felt every breath leave me. "What are you talking about?" She smiled, an expression colder than any Nebraska winter. "This was never about Keller. This is about you." My legs gave out, and I dropped to one knee. "No." She nodded, stepping closer. "Yes." Behind her, the paddock's straw circle lay empty, as if the earth itself had consumed its secret. But in that moment I understood I was the final piece in a plan I never saw coming. She bent, placing the baton against my shoulder. "You'll thank me for this." I looked up, the morning light catching on her eyes, and realized I might not survive to tell the rest. I slipped from behind the feed trough just as the sedan's headlights blinked off. The deep hush of Miller Road pressed on me, thicker than any fog I'd ever driven through. "Agent." Harmon's SUV idled a few yards away, motor ticking down. I began edging back toward it, weapon still drawn, senses keyed to every snap of twig, every rustle of straw. "Marcus," Harmon whispered, voice low in the open air. Her silhouette was half in shadow, half in the weak dawn light. "What now?" I kept my eyes on the fence line where the figure had vanished. "We wait," I said, voice rough. "They'll come back for their glove, or to see if we fled. Either way, they'll give themselves away." She nodded, crouching beside me. Across the paddock, the straw circle lay undisturbed in the growing pale light. I felt my stomach clench. They'd buried something here, then dug it up. Whatever it was, they'd moved it. Where? And why draw us into this trap? "Check the barn again," I said, nodding at the squat structure. "See if they left any tracks in the fresh blood." She moved off-guarded, creeping toward the barn door, flashlight sweeping low. I turned back to scan the paddock, flashlight trembling in my hand. The world felt unsteady, like the ground itself might shift away. 5 minutes crawled by. My jaw ached. Every breath came cold and jagged. Then a soft crunch behind me, bare-soled foot on broken straw. I whirled, light lancing through mist at the edge of the paddock. There, just for an instant, a pair of pale feet sliding between fence posts. I blinked, and they were gone. My pulse spiked. "They're here," I mouthed to Harmon, who snapped her light toward the fence. We both trained our beams on the gaps in the wire. Nothing moved. "Marcus," she whispered, "they're toying with us." I swallowed. Yeah. I realized then the trap had never been the glove or the blood. It was us, our need to chase every clue. If they could pull us out into the open, they could strike, or vanish again, leaving us exposed. I clicked off my light. Silence swallowed us. I crouched, heart hammering, and pressed my back against the cool metal of the chute. Harmon did the same. We sat, listening to the hum of dawn insects, waiting for the inevitable. The sound came then, the rasp of a gloved hand across metal, low and deliberate. I spun a fraction, heard it on the opposite fence post. Harmon froze beside me. Our eyes locked in the thin light. Time slowed. "On 3, I mouthed. "We run." She nodded. 1, 2, 3. We burst from cover, sprinting toward my cruiser parked at the edge of the paddock. Our boots slid in muck. I kept low, weapon raised in case the figure emerged. The fence line blurred past the blood smear, past the empty straw circle. My mind sketched the image of the circle like a target. We reached the road, lungs burning. I yanked open the cruiser door. Harmon dove in beside me. I slammed the door shut, hit the ignition, and the engine refused. My head snapped toward the dash. Battery dead. Figures in my peripheral vision, beyond the windshield, waited just off the road, still in shadow. Too close. I fumbled for the radio handset, but only silence. The key thunked uselessly. Adrenaline turned to ice. We were stranded. Harmon whispered, "Go." I snatched the door open and pulled her out. We raced back toward the barn, stumbling through tall grass. The figures stayed at the paddock's edge. 2 outlines, tall, lean. At the barn door, I forced it open. The splinters bit my fingers. We tumbled inside, breath ragged, eyes adjusting to the gloom. The barn was empty. No footprints in the blood, no shovel, no straw circle. Only silence broken by the whisper of wind through broken boards. Shadows pooled in the corners. We backed against the wall, weapons raised. Footsteps echoed outside, slow, heavy. I pressed my ear to the wood. Whoever they were, they moved like predators stalking us. My heart thundered. "Stay calm," I breathed to Harmon, though my voice quavered. I counted off steps, 10, 20, 30. Then the door groaned on its hinges. A hand, gloved, pushed it open. We leveled our weapons, but no one stepped in. The door rattled. Someone brushed past it, departing as silently as they'd come. I exhaled, relief and frustration warring. They want us to think they'll attack, I said, but they slipped away again. Harmon shook her head. It's psychological torture. Every time we chase, they vanish. I holstered my weapon and pulled my phone from my pocket. No signal. I tapped the screen. Nothing. We need to leave, I said. She nodded. Back to the station, get the generator running. We slipped out the barn's back entrance, hugging the building's shadow. Behind us, dawn brightened. We sprinted across the paddock to the cruiser. The engine still silent, headlights dark. I popped the hood, wires chewed, stripped down to bare copper. I spat into the mud. Whoever had done this had been thorough. No simple sabotage. They'd known exactly which wires to cut. They'd been inside my engine, in my armory, in my station. Harmon placed a hand on my shoulder. We need to think differently. They're using our predictability against us. I nodded, voice tight. Tomorrow, we go to Plan B. She climbed into the passenger seat, wiping mud from her pants. Plan B, set our own traps. I watched her, chest tight. We'll turn the tables. We trudged back to the barn, every instinct screaming that this was a mistake. But dawn was breaking fully now, painting the sky in pale blues and pinks. I drew a steadying breath and stepped forward. Behind me, Harmon followed. But as I lifted my flashlight once more to search the barn, the floorboards creaked. Too high-pitched for settling wood. My light flicked toward the rafters. There, hidden in the shadows, was the outline of another gloved figure, perched like a watcher, silent and still. I froze. Harmon's light swung up, illuminating the rafters, a solitary boot dangling over the beam. Beneath it, a pale hand held something, a small recorder, blinking red. I realized with a jolt they'd tracked every word, every plan. The recorder snapped off in a click, and the figure dismounted with unnatural grace, landing softly in the straw. Harmon spun, weapon raised. I dove to help, but the figure melted into the mist outside, vanishing before our eyes. Only the recorder lay at my feet, blinking its last light. I retrieved it, voice hollow. They won't stop. Harmon said nothing. We stood amid the bones of the barn, the recorder's red light fading, and realized the trap had never been a trap at all. It was an audition, for me. And as the pale morning sun filtered through broken boards, I pressed record on my own phone and whispered into its microphone. I'm the deputy. This is my confession. Outside, the recorder in my hand crackled to life. It played back my own voice, and then, layered beneath it, another voice that chilled me deeper than any footstep. Thank you for auditioning, Marcus. We'll be in touch. I stared at the device, dread curling in my chest, knowing that no matter how many radios went dead or engines died, the real betrayal had already begun, from within. I remember the moment I realized this season would be different. My name is Jack Monroe, deputy with the Coldwater County Sheriff's Office, and on the night of February 12, 1993, I'd finished my shift briefing at exactly 11:45 p.m., grabbed my thermos of coffee, black, 2 sugars, and headed out onto State Route 47. The sky was low and gray, lit only by the occasional flash of headlights through the falling snow. My breath caught in puffs, steam rising from the cab as I punched through the windshield wipers. The radio crackled. All units, drifting ice reported between mile markers 110 and 115. Drive with caution. Over. I clicked back. Copy that. Dispatch. Monroe en route. Over. I eased the Crown Victoria to the shoulder at mile marker 112, where the miles of flat farmland began to stretch out, broken only by the distant glow of a farmhouse or a lone grain elevator. Every curve in the road looked the same in this weather. Black asphalt slick with sleet, shoulders buried under 2 feet of snow. I thumbed the mic. "Dispatch, do we have any stranded reports?" Static hissed. Then, "Negative, Monroe." "No reports yet. I'll keep you posted." I nodded, though I knew they couldn't see me. The moment my tires crunched across the untouched shoulder, I saw it. A dark sedan, half buried in a snowbank, wheels turned at a weird angle. No brake lights, no movement. I killed the engine. My boots hit the gravel, crunch after crunch echoing in the hush. The wind caught my patrol coat, tugging at me. I pulled the collar up and clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the flakes in a narrow cone, illuminating the car's driver door, hanging open as if someone had fallen out. I lowered myself to the ground. Flashlight trained on the back seat. Empty. A battered suitcase lay on the floorboard, a name tag peeling off the handle. I swallowed. "Dispatch, Monroe. I've got an abandoned vehicle at EM 112. Checking trunk now." No answer. Only wind. Hands shaking, I jiggled the trunk latch. It popped. I lifted the lip and the beam fell on a body. Pale, still, draped in frost. Jeans, a wool coat, winter boots. His head lolled back against the edge, mouth slightly open. I knelt, breath catching. His eyes were open, frozen mid-blink, staring at me. An awful final expression. My grip tightened on the flashlight. My breath hitched. I wanted to look away, but couldn't. My training kicked in. I pressed my gloved hand to his wrist. No pulse. I fumbled for the radio, teeth chattering. "Dispatch, medical, coroner, now!" I secured the trunk, jogged back to my car, and wrapped a thermal blanket around his shoulders. The radio lit up. "Monroe, be advised, back up en route. ETA 10 minutes. Over." The waiting was torture. I paced the shoulder, each step raising slush around my boots. Every gust of wind sounded like distant footsteps crunching in the snow. My eyes never left the car. I pictured the driver walking off into the night, or worse, crouching somewhere, nearby, watching. My hands hovered over my service weapon, the weight familiar but cold against my palm. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Finally, the headlights of another patrol car appeared. Deputy Larson stepped out, chattering teeth, but I waved him off. "Stay back," I hissed. "Get the evidence techs here." He nodded, voice shaky. I forced my gaze back to the trunk. The victim's eyes still stared. I knelt again, fitting his handcuffs just in case, and marked the scene. We preserved tracks in the snow, photographed the open door, the suitcase on the floor, the icicles hanging from the rear bumper. The storm swallowed every scratch, every grain of disturbed gravel. When the coroner loaded him into the van, I watched as the plate crunched over the drift. I noted the Minnesota plates, out of state. I radioed his plate number. Dispatch confirmed, no missing person report. I exhaled hard. Someone's gone off the grid. I scribbled notes in my log. Time of discovery, weather conditions, victim description, frozen terror expression. The words felt hollow. 2 weeks later, on February 27th, I was back out on the same route. The wind had died down, but the sky hung low with fresh snow. I'd barely warmed up my cruiser before my radio buzzed. "Silent alarm, McAllister Farm Diner, off Route 78, former highway stop. Your closest." I peeled off toward the location, boots itching to find another victim. The diner's neon sign flickered one last time before giving out, a dying heartbeat in the darkness. I cut the engine at the cracked entrance, flashlight in hand. Inside, plaster peeled from the walls, tables overturned, half-frozen coffee in chipped mugs. My beam caught footprints leading from the counter to the back storage room. The door was ajar. I thought it empty, until the freezer door swing creaked. My heart thumped. I eased it open. Inside was a man, standing upright as if leaning against the metal walls, head tilted, face frozen in twilight. No sign of injury, just cold. I dropped to one knee, voice low in the hush. "Sir, you okay?" No response, only the click of my flashlight. His coat was dusted with frost. I slipped my gloves on, handed him my blanket. He didn't move. I pried his arm, no pulse. I knelt and checked his pockets. Minimal ID, a folded letter from a Chicago insurance firm dated 2 days prior. The wind picked up outside. I swore I heard a door slam. My blood ran cold. I radioed dispatch. Second victim, possible homicide. Location, McAllister Farm. No sign of attacker. Sleet drummed on the roof. I felt frozen in place. The world narrowed to that silent, ice-coated body and the empty room beyond. The coroner arrived, and though it was similar to the first, clean clothes, posed posture, the lack of injury puzzled everyone. The medical examiner muttered about hypothermia, but I saw the same eyes as before, open wide in final shock. A message left by someone who knew exactly how to play with fear. The days after, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my house sounded like an intruder. My radio sleepily chattered updates, but even that was too loud. I shifted my pillow, tried to force myself awake, convinced I'd missed something, until I realized I kept checking badge numbers of strangers. Doing my job had become a guessing game. On March 15th, I was called to County Road 22, an abandoned pickup left idling on the grass verge. Engine warm, headlights on. I crouched behind my cruiser, heart pounding as I approached. A man stood beside the truck, hands cuffed behind his back, thin, pale, eyes expressionless. His name was Greg Patterson, traveling from Omaha. He never spoke. I cut the tape binding him, led him to my cruiser. He got in the back seat and just sat. No gratitude, no fear, nothing. Medics took him away, but as I drove off, my fogged breath against the window, I realized I'd never seen a victim like that. Alive, but empty. My commander gathered us in briefing the next morning. The pattern was clear. Vehicles left, drivers incapacitated without visible violence, posed to deliver a message. We had no suspect, no motive. Just the chilling knowledge that someone out there was orchestrating these scenes, using winter storms as their weapon. Each night I patrolled, I felt it. Eyes on me from the shadows. I double-checked every vehicle, every shadow beneath the overpasses. I left no door unchecked, no trunk unopened. I carried pepper spray in one hand, radio in the other, coffee growing cold in my cup holder. I feared every silent alarm, every abandoned diner. I began to dread the snow. Each flake became a countdown to the next body. The storm was no longer nature's fury, it was a countdown. And somewhere out there, someone in a uniform like mine was calling the shots, waiting for me to find the fallout of his twisted game. And I knew deep down, when the next call came, it wouldn't just end in another frozen corpse. It would end with me, or worse, someone I cared about, left to stare into the eyes of terror, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no clear escape. The night air had barely settled before the call came in, March the 29th, 10 days after the pickup. I was parked outside the station, engine off, reviewing notes by the glow of the street lamp. The radio crackled. Deputy Monroe, silent alarm at Red Oak Grain Elevator off County Road 9. Chief wants you there now. My gut sank. I grabbed my coat, radio in hand, and slipped into the driver's seat. The world outside was a blur of white, and my breath fogged the windshield as I punched the ignition. Sirens sliced the stillness, but I cut them before reaching the elevator. No sense rattling windows when witnesses might be spooked. The long driveway was flanked by rusting equipment, half buried in snow. I killed the engine 100 yards out and crept forward on foot, flashlight tapping against my belt. The grain elevator loomed like a skeletal tower, its corroded panels groaning in the wind. I climbed the metal staircase to the main sliding door. It hung slightly ajar, bad sign. I radioed dispatch, Monroe, on scene. No sign of forced entry aside from the door, proceeding inside. My boots crunched on the icy concrete floor. Frosted footprints led from the office area into the back where the grain funnels stood. The feeding bins were silent, but a low hum, like a broken alarm, flickered in the distance. I followed the sound. A set of tire tracks in the dust led to a service door at the rear. I twisted the handle. It gave. I paused, listening. Nothing but my own heartbeat. The beam of my flashlight landed on a figure sitting against the wall, back slumped, head bowed. A man in a dark overcoat, his hat pulled low. I knelt beside him, voice low. "Sir? You okay?" He lifted his head slowly, eyes gone dull, no tremor in his breath. I crouched lower, checking for wounds. None. His stiff shoulders and frozen knees told me he'd been left to the cold. I pressed my glove to his neck. No pulse. I reached for my phone to call for medics and coroner, but the radio coughed. "Emergency traffic, Monroe." I keyed the mic. "Go ahead." Dispatch voice crackled back. "Deputy, we've had another. Route 47, mile marker 128. We need backup here first." My stomach twisted. The killer was taunting us, hitting us multiple times before we could respond. I stood, adrenaline draining into my toes. I marked the body with caution tape from my patrol car, snapped photos, collected footprints in the snow. Each detail was another piece of a puzzle that refused to fit together. His coat was buttoned perfectly, no scuffs, no signs of struggle. Like the others, he was posed, an exhibit in a twisted gallery. I made it back to my cruiser just as the first storm winds hit. Dispatch's voice blurred with static. "Monroe, units are stretched thin. Keep us updated." I responded, "Copy that. Heading to Route 47 now." My mind raced. What did we miss here? How could we be so outmaneuvered? At mile marker 128, I found Deputy Larson crouched near the guardrail, flashlight trained on a second trunk. He looked up, pale. "It's him again," he rasped. I pried the trunk open. The victim was a woman this time, a rarity, mid-30s, hands folded neatly on her lap. No coat, just a thin blouse and pressed slacks. I knelt, stomach lurching, as her lifeless eyes stared into mine. I radioed dispatch. "Fourth victim, female, Midwest plates, no missing report." The words tasted bitter. This was no random spree, this was a dark design. The killer was escalating. Gender shifts, new locations, tighter timings. We worked through the night, cataloging every detail. The temperature at each scene, the timestamps, the position of limbs, the absence of fingerprints. Each death was a coded message, and I was deciphering it too late. By dawn, I sat in my cruiser, slumped over the wheel, coffee untouched. My uniform was stiff from the cold, my hands shaking. I stared at the notebook on my lap. 4 deaths in 6 weeks, each perfectly staged. I flipped it open. Notes, sketches, a tally of unanswered questions. The sky lightened, but there was no relief. I realized I'd been chasing shadows, our victim count climbing while the killer vanished into the whiteout. I rubbed my eyes, saw the grains of frost on the windshield like black specks. I started the engine and steered north toward highway patrol. 2 deputies, 2 scenes, 1 mounting nightmare. As I crossed the county line, flashers blinking, I felt that familiar weight settle in my chest. The knowledge that the storm was his ally, that every blizzard would now carry his signature. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white. Somewhere out there, someone wearing a uniform was preparing the next scene. And this time, it wouldn't be a stranger we found in the trunk. It would be someone we knew. I didn't stop to think about my dinner left cold on the stove, or the texts from my wife growing desperate. The only thing that mattered was staying ahead of him. So I pushed down the radio mic. Dispatch Monroe. I'm en route to coordinate with State Patrol. Prep for 5 more, because he's not done. The sky was empty of stars by the time I rolled onto Route 17, April 12th, exactly 2 weeks after the Red Oak elevator. My cruiser's heater was on full blast, but the chill clung to my bones. I flipped the visor mirror open, wiped frost from the edge, and caught a glimpse of my eyes. Hollow, bloodshot. I told myself, stay sharp. Dispatch crackled in my ear. Deputy Monroe, we've got an overturned semi on the overpass at mile marker 46. Engine still warm. No driver in sight. ETA for backup is 5 minutes. I eased the Crown Victoria across the bridge, careful not to spin the rear wheels on the slick surface. Halfway up, I saw the tanker, its trailer jackknifed, wheels turning aimlessly, diesel pooling on the asphalt. I killed the engine 50 feet back. The only light came from my headlights and the distant glow of Coldwater's storefronts. I stepped onto the bridge, every footstep whisper quiet. The wind funneled through the girders, sounding like faint voices. I swept my spotlight along the cab. No body in the driver's seat. I peered into the barrel of the trailer. No sign of a hatch or cargo. The door to the sleeper compartment was ajar. Beacon on scene, I reported. I'm checking the sleeper. I climbed the handrail and dropped down onto the trailer's deck. Metal creaked under my weight. The door swung freely, scraping against the frame. Inside, the bunk was empty except for a single coat hanger dangling from the overhead rail. I flicked on the dome light. It buzzed, then died. I fumbled for my flashlight in the darkness. A faint humming drew me to the far corner. I crouched and shone my beam through the tiny porthole window. There he was, lying face down on the mattress, arms stretched overhead. A dark stain spread across the sheets. My stomach turned. I pried the door open wider. The man was dressed in a high-visibility vest, reflective stripes gleaming under my light. He didn't move. His head lolled at an unnatural angle. I yanked my gloves on, pressed against his collarbone. No pulse. I backed out, slammed the door, and ran to the cab. Fingers trembling, I radioed, Deputy Monroe to dispatch, fatality in semi-sleeper, mile marker 46, male trucker, no ID yet. I'm bagging the scene. The sky overhead rumbled. A distant growl of thunder. I hated that sound. It made every shadow look alive. By the time Larson and the coroner arrived, debris had drifted into mounds at the trailer's wheels. We worked quickly. Photographs, fingerprint dusting, evidence markers placed beside the oscillator light and overturned coffee mug. The coroner cut the tarp and lifted the body. No obvious wounds, just that telltale posture of final collapse and eyes wide open, glazed in shock. I took a step back, rubbing my arms. My radio crackled with the dispatcher's voice. "Monroe, you copy?" "We have another. Abandoned police cruiser on Highway 54, plate CPD 903. All lights off. Officers dispatched." I exhaled hard. "I copy. I'll divert." I raced down the ramp, tires skidding on ice, toward Highway 54. In my mind, the pieces were spinning out of control. Each location had different terrain: farms, diners, grain elevators, bridges, and now trucks. The killer wasn't sparing anyone: commercial drivers, service workers, even farmers. And now, a police cruiser. I reached the scene just as Larson turned on his light bar. The CPD vehicle was parked on a curve, doors shut, engine cold. No ID on the passenger side. We approached together, hands on our holsters, training kicking in. I tapped the rear window, no movement. Larson jiggled the handle, locked. I radioed dispatch for a key, then pried the door open with my boot. Inside lay a man in uniform, presumed off-duty, stretched across the bench seat. His radio lay on the floor, still muted. I knelt, pressing my glove to his throat. Nothing. His nightstick and badge were gone. Only the cold. Larson shook his head. "This is it, Jack. He's targeting us." I swallowed the lump in my throat. He wants us to feel the fear we feel when we discover bodies. Back at the station, the chief convened a task force. Coldwater County, State Patrol. Even the FBI's field office in Kansas City. They gave it a name, Operation Night Watch, and fleshed out shifts, checkpoints, mobile patrols. But nothing stopped the next strike. 3 nights later, on April 16th, I stood outside the Woodsman Motel, an old brick building just off I-35. The neon sign sputtered, "Vacancy." I checked the slip for room 11. No key. I approached the window, saw a figure inside through drawn curtains. I knocked through the glass panel with my baton. The door swung open. A man in a suit, briefcase in hand, froze. He stared at my badge, then at me. I flicked my flashlight on him. No coat, nothing frozen. Just clean-cut, suit pressed. He blinked. "Deputy Monroe, I'm here about a welfare check." My voice sounded tinny in the night air. The man nodded, backing up. I followed him into the lobby. He gestured toward room 11. The guy next door, he was acting weird. We stepped into the hallway. The carpet was threadbare. Room 11 door stood slightly ajar. I pulled my weapon, silent. Inside, the bed was stripped, a mattress on the floor. In the closet lay another man, face down, arms crossed. Leather jacket, jeans, no hat, no gloves. He looked peaceful, too peaceful. I pressed my radio. "Victim found, Woodsman Motel, room 11. Female guest in lobby, possible witness." I knelt, checked for pulse. Nothing. I rose, scanning for evidence. The witness, a woman in her 40s, clutched her suitcase, tears in her eyes. I squeezed her shoulder. "Ma'am, you're safe now." Her voice shook. He looked just like you." My blood ran cold. "What?" "He was wearing a deputy's coat, same badge number. I thought it was you." I exchanged a look with Larson. He tightened his jaw. "Impersonation." I felt the walls closing in. The killer wasn't just planting bodies. He was breaking us from the inside, making us question every call, every uniform. My coffee went cold again. I drove home that morning, the sun rising on fresh snow. I passed mile marker 46, then 128, then EM 112, all scenes of horror. I felt the weight of every life lost, every scream swallowed by the storm. That night, I locked my house door twice, checked the windows, even taped my badge number to the door. I lay in bed, eyes open. The storm howled outside, promising more snow, more bodies, more fear. I closed my eyes, but I saw his face, empty eyes behind a deputy's smile, waiting for me to come get him. And I knew he would strike again, in the dead of night when our guard was lowest. And all I could do was drive into the storm, chasing shadows that always slipped through my fingers. I eased my cruiser onto Highway 20 under a low, bruised sky. April 24th, just 12 days after the Woodsman Motel. My visor scraped frost from the windshield as I flicked on the overhead lights, the red and blue pulses fading into the early dawn. My breath was a shallow drum in my ears. The radio only crackled with weather alerts. Snow squalls expected in 1 hour. Visibility down to 50 yards. I drummed my gloved fingers on the wheel. Dispatch crackled. Monroe, we've got a 1055 at the abandoned church on County Road 5, Parish Hall door forced. Possible trespasser. ETA 2 minutes, I replied, voice tight. On my way. The church sat alone on a rise, its steeple a jagged silhouette against the gray. Broken stained glass windows, doors boarded years ago, paint peeling in long strips. The sign out front, First Coldwater Baptist, hung crooked, swinging in the wind. I killed the engine 50 yards out and approached on foot, each footstep raising spires of snow. Ice clung to my eyelashes. I pressed my shoulder into the heavy parish hall door. It gave with a groan. Inside, pews lay overturned, hymnals scattered like fallen leaves. My flashlight beam danced across the walls, landing on kneeling benches, then on footprints leading to a rusted service elevator and back. I knelt to photograph the prints. Men's work boots, size 11, treaded deep. A low hum echoed from the elevator shaft. My chest tightened. I climbed onto the platform and pried open the gate. The lamp flickered as I dropped into the belly of the building. The metal walls closed in. The only light was my flashlight reflecting off rivets. The hum grew louder, like a broken generator. When the elevator hit ground level, I stepped out into darkness. I called out, "Coldwater County, anyone here?" No answer, just the hum and my own ragged breathing. I swept the beam across crates of church supplies, folding chairs, dusty hymn books. The footprints led past overturned oil drums to a back corridor stained with rust. I followed the corridor to a steel-barred door. The padlock had been cut. Metal fragments littered the floor. My heart pounded in my ears. I cracked the door, it moaned. Inside was an office, decayed files piled atop a desk. But atop the desk sat a laptop, impossible in a condemned building. I crouched, gloves crackling static on the keyboard. The screen flickered on, a camera feed labeled Control Room. I swore. My flashlight darted to a TV monitor in the corner. Live feed from multiple angles. The diner on Route 78, the grain elevator, the Woodsman Motel lobby. I recognized the frozen frames. The diner victim's body laid on the counter. The grain elevator victim posed against the bins. The motel victim slumped in the seat. Each scene paused, every angle pre-recorded. The killer had set up surveillance of our own crime scenes. I stumbled back, yanking out the power cord. The screens went dark. My flashlight flickered against the metal walls. I pounded the desk. "Who are you? Show yourself." The only response was the whine of wind through broken vents. My radio crackled abruptly. "Deputy Monroe, are you there?" I keyed the mic, voice shaking. I'm in the church basement. Someone set up a fucking surveillance rig. Images from every scene. He's watching us." Dispatch's voice was distant. "Backup is 2 minutes out. Hold position." I moved back toward the elevator shaft, cogitating. The killer's pattern, a new layer. Not just staging bodies, but spying on us. Studying our reactions. He wanted more than fear. He wanted control. I climbed the elevator back to the parish hall, every step echoing. My shoulders burned with cold sweat. Outside, the sky had turned to sheets of white. I throttled the cruiser to life and peeled away, headlights slicing through the squall. On the ride to coordinate with State Patrol, I reviewed the feed sequence in my mind. 4 monitors capturing every angle, every inch of our investigation. He'd been inside the church all along, setting cameras before we even arrived. He'd known where we'd look. He'd predicted our moves. At the Joint Command Post, the chief's face was grave. "You sure about the feed?" I handed him the laptop, screens shot of each location. He nodded once, grim. "We need to shut down every local surveillance network, pull logs, see where he got access." I sank into a chair, blanket around my shoulders. The storm battered the windows. Outside, snow drifted like ash in a fireless world. The silence in the room was heavier than any confession. I stared at the laptop, the paused image of the diner counter replaying in my mind, the victim's outstretched hands, the open eyes. Then I noticed something new. A small timestamp overlay showing the exact moment I'd first called dispatch. Time code synchronized across all cameras. He'd been live streaming our own communications. My heart thundered. If he could intercept our radio traffic, he could be anywhere. Inside the precinct, in our homes, even riding along on shifts. I realized with a sick twist that none of us were safe. I gathered my coat and badge. "I'm going out there," I said. The chief's voice was low. "Be careful." But I'd already pushed through the door into the whiteout, into the storm that echoed with every click of wind, and with the certainty that somewhere in the fury of winter, a man wearing my uniform was watching, waiting, and always one step ahead. And I knew by the time I found the cameras he would have moved again. The storm would hide him, the snow would bury him, and the next scene would be his masterpiece. A body posed not just to scare us, but to prove that in this deadly game, he alone held the script. I woke before my alarm. The sky still ink black outside my kitchen window. It was May 2nd, just a week after the church surveillance rig. Every muscle in my body ached from endless hours on cold pavement, but sleep offered no refuge. I padded barefoot across the linoleum, cold as ice, to switch on the kettle. Steam hissed into the silence. My wife's message glowed on the counter. "Be safe tonight. Love you." I forced a smile, tapped out a quick reply. "Always." By 10:45 p.m., I was back in the cruiser, heater blasting, coffee in hand. Dispatch crackled. "Monroe, 10:55 at Hollow Creek Bridge, mile marker 98. Complainant reports screams and headlights going off. ETA 5 minutes. My gut sank. I punched the siren briefly to clear the roads, then cut it. The grove of cedars lining the creek looked like silent sentinels in my headlights. Snow had melted into slush, but the air still smelled like frost. I parked 20 yards from the bridge, boots crunching over broken guardrail. I clicked on my flashlight and radio. Monroe to base, on scene. Only static answered. I swept the beam across the wooden planks, wet, warped ice patches catching the light. A low moan drifted from below. I leaned over the railing, shining the beam into the black water. No figure, no sound, then a splash. I stepped back, heart pounding. My flashlight beam landed on the bank, footprints leading into the underbrush. I followed, flashlight bobbing with each step. My pulse thundered in my ears. The prints were human, size 12 boots, tread deep. I followed them 50 feet to a clearing where headlights were parked off the road, engine idling. No driver in sight. I killed the engine. The rumble ceased, leaving only my breath. I raised the beam to the open passenger door. Inside, on the floorboard, lay a folded uniform, cold, damp. I swallowed. "Dispatch, abandoned cruiser, possible evidence," I whispered into the mic. I reached in and pulled out the uniform, identical to mine, with a badge I didn't recognize. The patch read Coldwater Sheriff's Auxiliary. I frowned. The auxiliary force had disbanded years ago. I slipped gloves on, bagged the uniform, and stepped back as flashes from backup cars lit the trees. Deputy Larson emerged, breath billowing. He nodded, pale. Crash site down the road, pickup with cables across the hood. I followed him back to my cruiser. We drove 2 miles south. The scene was under the overpass where State Route 89 crossed a dry creek bed. A red pickup was stopped, cables slung over the guardrail. The driver's door was jammed. Larson pried it open. Inside, a man leaned forward, forehead against the steering wheel, boots neatly placed on the floor. No coat, just a thin shirt. He didn't move. I crouched beside him, flashlight and service weapon drawn. His breath was shallow. I pushed on his shoulder. He slumped. I knelt, checking pulses. None. Eyes rolled back, whites visible. I stood, squeezing the radio. Victim discovered. Route 89 overpass. Male subject, alive on arrival. Now deceased. My stomach twisted. This one had been left alive, breathing air that would freeze his lungs. Each victim had a different fate, but always the same end. Larson flicked his flashlight across the bed. A single photograph on the dash of my cruiser parked outside my house, headlights on, windows dark. My heart seized. He held it out. Found this on the hood. My knees buckled. That photo had never left my driveway. Someone had been watching me, my house, my patrol routes, my family. I swallowed bile. I told Larson, check VICAP. No hits on similar MO outside our cases. He nodded, jaw tight. As the coroner arrived, I backed away, numbing the edges of panic. I watched as they loaded the corpse, an eerily calm final performance. I couldn't stop picturing the photo taped to that hood, the killer peering through my windows. I radioed dispatch. All units, heightened alert. Suspect is targeting us personally. Late that night, I drove home in silence. Siren off. Lights dimmed. Each mile was a countdown to my own front door. I pulled in at 3:17 a.m. as on my watch, every call time-stamped in my mind. I killed the engine, sat for a moment. Coffee gone cold. I grabbed my badge and keys, stepping onto the porch. Inside, the house was dark. I flicked on hallway lights, scanning each room. My wife's side of the bed was empty. Heart hammering. I crept to the bedroom window. Drawers slightly open, clothes neatly folded inside. Nothing disturbed. I exhaled, muscles unclenching. Then I noticed it. On the pillow, in plain sight, lay the auxiliary uniform I'd bagged hours earlier. I froze. It smelled faintly of diesel and snow. The sleeves were spread as if someone had tried it on, then tossed it there. My hands shook as I reached down, touching the fabric, cold, stiff. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, an unknown number. I answered on speaker. "Deputy Monroe," I said, voice tight. A click, then silence, then a whisper. "You're getting close, Jack." The line went dead. My breath caught. I spun around, footsteps in the hall. The lights flickered. I yanked my service weapon from my belt, swiveling toward the door. But it was too late. The hall was empty. No thief, no intruder. Just the echo of a voice and the soft hum of the house settling. I sank to the floor, back against the bed. The uniform lay beside me, waiting. Outside, a lone car engine started, revving once, then driving away. My front door remained locked, windows shut tight. I called dispatch one last time. All units, suspects following me home. He's inside my head now. The only reply was distant static, and the echo of that whisper, "You're getting close, Jack." And I realized the final scene wouldn't be on a storm-lashed highway or beneath a frozen bridge. It would be here, in my own home, where trust died last, and where the storm was waiting to bury me alive. I felt the weight of the badge before I ever felt the weight of the night. My hands were slick with sweat when I climbed into the cruiser just after midnight, and the chill that rolled off Route 47 felt like it was crawling through the fabric of my uniform. I'd been on the force for 2 years, but every time I settled into that faded vinyl seat, I felt like a rook in a kingdom I didn't fully understand. The town of Harrowsfield sleeps under a quilt of darkness this time of year. Cornfields on both sides of the road, black stalks rustling in the wind. The speedometer glowed orange, 2:14 a.m. I flicked the radio off and let the engine idle, listening to nothing but my own breath. I rubbed my thumb over the silver of my ring, a wedding band, more promise than comfort these days. My wife worries about me out here. My daughter asks if monsters hide in the dark. I tell her the monsters are just stories, but I'm not always sure. The call came over at 1:08. Suspicious vehicle parked at the old Jennings barn. Lights on inside. I punched the mic. 10-4, headed there now. The Jennings place sits at the crest of a slight hill, abandoned since Old Man Jennings died of a heart attack in '09. A barn, red as dried blood, doors cracked open like a mouth waiting to swallow trespassers. I left the cruiser off the main road and let the headlights sweep the gravel driveway. My boots crunched as I crossed the yard. The barn's overhead light flickered, bare bulb swinging like a pendulum. No sound, nothing but my heartbeat thundering in my ears. I called out, "Harrowsfield PD, come on out." My voice sounded small. A shape moved inside the barn, casting a tall shadow against the back wall. I drew my flashlight and pistol, moving low, every footstep measured. The beam landed on a rusted feed trough. Then the shape turned. Not a person. An old dump truck, engine cold. Headlights dimly aglow, the driver's door ajar. I shuffled forward, light catching on chipped paint. I tapped the hood, no motion. The cab was empty, no engine noise, no warmth from the radiator. And in the bed, tangled in rope and blue tarps, something shifted. A muffled groan. I shot out a hail. "State your business." No reply, just that low moan. I shook my head, set the pistol aside, gripped the flashlight tight. I yanked back the tarp. A pair of boots, coated in dried mud, flesh pale, blood caked to denim. I swallowed. "Dispatch, this is Lawson. I've got a possible medical aid at Jennings Barn off Route 47. Need EMS immediately." Siren on the cruiser cut the silence as I radioed Code 3. We found him conscious but fading. Local kid, missing since sunset. He mumbled about headlights behind him on the highway, a man shouting, "Pull over or we'll shoot." He fled to the barn. I kept telling him he was safe, kept checking his pulse. When EMS loaded him, I didn't ask who tried to run him down. Night patrols teach you, sometimes you know more, by holding your tongue. Back at the station, I logged the run. I scrubbed my hands at the sink, the warm water turning pink as it washed away dried mud and blood. I caught my reflection. Dark circles under tired eyes. 6 years on the streets will do that. 6 months on nights will do worse. They say shift work fractures your mind. I believe it. Through the glass, I watched Sergeant Collins tap away at his keyboard in the chief's office. I thought of the hidden room I found last winter. A vault behind metal shelves in the basement of old Crestwood Courthouse. 7 trunks, names matching missing persons from decades ago. Things I swore I'd put aside. But they never left me. The next call came an hour later. Silent alarm at the Dairy Queen off Main Street. I drove through empty streets, closed neon signs buzzing overhead, grease-slick parking lot. Inside, the freezers hummed low. Pixie Stix wrappers scattered like confetti. Manager checked cameras. no sign of a break-in. I walked the aisles, ran my gloved hand along a row of ice cream tubs. No prints, no footprints, nothing. I left with a shrug, thinking the old console door looked too freshly wiped. Then the radio buzzed static, an urgent crackle. Warm Auto Run, reachable at Miller's Market, South End. Abandoned. I cursed under my breath. Miller's Market had closed months ago. Twilight bargains left to rot behind glass doors. When I rolled in, headlights cut through the inky lot. I saw the flicker of a tail light. A maroon sedan with windows so tinted I couldn't see inside. Engine idling, doors locked. I nodded into the mic. Possible auto run, Miller's Market. Checking. I approached, slow, holstered pistol in front. Radio silent. I circled to the driver's side, breathing ragged from the cold night air. No one inside. The seat warm, coffee cup in the cup holder, still half full, cream congealed at the edges. I checked the ashtray, cigarette butts still smoldering. Then the door shut itself. I yanked it open. Empty. As I looked up at the high windows of the market, I thought I saw a face behind the glass, pale in the overhead freezer light. I stepped back. No one there. I turned to the sedan's hood. Nothing. Then the market doors slid open with a hiss. A man emerged, stooped. Shabby coat, eyes sunken. He twitched like he'd been under bright lights too long. "He's been waiting," he said in a gravel voice. "Down the back aisles." I radioed backup. He pointed deep into the store, past aisles half covered in tarp. My light swept over spilled flour and crushed egg cartons. My pulse slowed. Empty, yet I felt the weight of someone there. Then a scream, sharp, inside. I ran in. The freezer door hung open. No one inside, but footprints led behind a stack of empty pallets. I bent and followed, light trembling. On the concrete floor, letters drawn in smashed sugar, "Help." Beneath it, a handprint smeared red. I closed my eyes for a second, fought bile back down my throat. When I came out, the man was gone. No sedan, no footprints in the snow. Just a trail of cracks in the frozen puddle where I'd stood, and that whisper of movement behind me, like a breath in my ear. I spun with my light, nothing but my own reflection in the glass. I marked the run as unfounded. My report signed off at 4:27 a.m. At 5, I drove out to my favorite spot on Willow Creek Road. A single lamppost halfway between cornfields. I parked and shut off the engine. The air smelled of damp earth. I slid out of the cruiser and leaned. Against the hood, eyes closed. Radio silent. I imagined that basement vault again. Trunks with names. Faces that didn't get to go home. The dawn was pale red when the call cut through again. Blood on the mic. Possible kidnapping. Country road near Whispering Pines. My head snapped up. No Whispering Pines in this county. No pines at all. But at 5:52 a.m. the miles didn't matter. I turned the key, tires spitting gravel as I tore back into darkness. And so the night goes. Shadows behind every barn, echo in every empty store, footsteps just out of sight. I learned to breathe around the tension, swallow it like bad coffee at 3 a.m. I keep scanning every silent road, every flickering porch light, because I know what hides beneath the quiet. It's the part of me that remembers secrets older than I am. Secrets that got buried behind metal doors, and I refuse to let them stay buried. The engine dies at Whispering Pines, or whatever this place really is. The roads lined with pines, dark trunks rising like sentries. My headlights catch a figure in the ditch, a woman in a hospital gown, ankles bound with rope. She stares without moving. I open the door, hand on the radio mic, but before I can speak, she lifts a finger to her lips and shakes her head. Then she smiles. I don't ask why. I don't ask who. Because around here the questions only lead you deeper into the darkness. I round the cruiser, approach her slow. The ground crunches under my boots like bones. Her smile stays steady. I step closer, and the air leaks out of the night, all sound fading into a long, held breath. And every instinct screams don't approach, but I do, because someone has to. I reach out, the world goes black. I wake up on the hood of my cruiser, alone, the woman gone, the rope still by my side. No footprints, no evidence, just that smile burned into my mind. The mic crackles again. Lawson, you there? Unit 12. Are you alive? I sit up, hands shaking. I tap the mic. I'm here. The dawn finds me slumped at the wheel, and I realize I've been holding my breath all night. Because the real horror isn't what you see. It's what you know is out there, waiting for you beside every abandoned lot and silent road. And you'll never get to the bottom of it, no matter how many nights you spend chasing ghosts. I woke with the weight of the night pressing down on my chest, eyelids gritty as I blinked against the dim glow of dawn's first light slipping through the windshield. My uniform was stiff with sweat and dust. My hands trembled as I unclipped my radio. I didn't know how long I'd been out cold, long enough for the sun to stain the horizon orange. I keyed the mic. Unit 12 to dispatch. I'm alive. I need a status check. Static, then the familiar voice. Lawson, you scared us. We thought you were off-grid. ETA on location? I cleared my throat, trying to steady my voice. At Whispering Pines, requesting backup and medical, possible victim down. Copy, units en route. I slid out of the cruiser and staggered around to the passenger side, half expecting to see that woman's hospital gown in the seat beside me. But it was empty. A stray rope lay coiled on the floorboard, the fibers stiff and frayed. I picked it up, running a finger along its length, remembering her smile. Unnerving, flat, like she'd known I'd come. I pocketed the rope and climbed back behind the wheel, feet numb on the pedals. The road, if you could call it that, snaked into the pines, the trees crowding in overhead, so their branches wove a net of shadow even as the sun rose. I flicked on the headlights, then off again. Too bright, too jarring. Better to keep to the darkness, I understood. The radio buzzed. Unit 7 on scene. What do you have? Nothing yet, I answered. Sweep the ditch line, check behind the trees. I drove slowly, spotlights slicing through the underbrush. Branches scraped the doors. The air smelled of pine sap and damp earth. There were no tracks in the gravel, no signs of a struggle, just that eerie feeling of being watched. As I passed where I thought I'd seen her, I spotted fresh tire ruts cutting across the shoulder and disappearing into the woods. Muddy grooves that hadn't been there when I arrived. My pulse spiked. I stepped out and followed the ruts, radio set to open channel in case she, or whoever, called out. The forest swallowed the beam of my flashlight. I edged forward, every shadow shifting at the corner of my eye. My Glock lay heavy in its holster, finger resting on the trigger guard. I rounded a stand of young pines and froze. There, carved into the bark of a tree, was her face. Not a carving, but a print in sap, two dark oval shapes for eyes, a slash of line for a mouth. I shone my light, but the sap glistened wet. I spun around, no footprints, no signs of who made it. I swallowed, my throat was raw. I tapped the mic. Unit 12 to dispatch. I found a marking. Need CSI out here? On the way, came the reply. I backed out, retraced my steps to the cruiser, and climbed in. Engines idling. I watched the woods through the windshield, waiting. The rustle of wildlife echoed, but beneath it all, something else. A faint crunch, like gravel scraping under boots. Automatic heartbeat checked against the sound. I opened the door, pistol drawn, then paused. No threat yet, only the trees. I stepped out, flashlight sweeping. The crunching stopped. Silence. Then my radio chirped. Unit 7 found something. I rushed back in, slammed the door, and tore down the forest road to where Unit 7's lights painted the trees red and blue. The state troopers had set up cones around a fresh hole in the ditch bank. They knelt beside it, shining beams inside. I knelt too and peered in. The hole led to an old drainage pipe, half collapsed but big enough for a person. Inside lay footprints in mud, smeared and heading underground. Something glinted at the entrance. A silver locket on a thin chain, the kind little girls wear. My gut twisted. Trooper Diaz held up gloves and an evidence bag. Found this at the mouth. We'll dust for prints. I stepped back as they lowered a light into the pipe. The beam illuminated something further in, distorted by distance but undeniably human-shaped. My heart hammered. "Get me a harness," I said, voice low. "I'm going in." The troopers exchanged looks. "You sure?" Diaz asked. I nodded. "She needs me." They clipped a rope to my belt and handed me a helmet light. I squatted and braced my back against the pipe wall, then slid inside. The pipe was tight, the air stale, and the walls slick with water and grime. My boots squelched, leaving prints, trails of presence. I crawled forward, the beam flickering on roots and debris. After 10 yards, the pipe opened into a larger chamber, an underground culvert beneath the county road. The air here pressed heavy, smelled of rot and concrete. I clicked off the helmet light and switched on my flashlight. The beam danced across shapes. Old trash cans, broken pallets, and then a woman's leg bent at the knee. I swallowed, aimed my light. Her face was a blur in the darkness. She lay curled, eyes half open, breathing shallow. I knelt beside her. Her lips moved, but no sound came. I slapped her shoulder. She opened her eyes wide, terror pooling there. "It's okay," my voice shook. "I've got you." She tried to speak, but only a gasp escaped. Her hand found mine, grip weak. I tapped my radio mic. "Lawson to dispatch. I have a victim. Send medevac rescue team to culvert under County Road 12. She squeezed my hand, tears mixing dirt on her cheek. I reached into my coat and pulled out my flask. No time for formalities, and pressed it to her lips. She drank, then coughed. I rubbed her back. "Why?" she rasped. I knelt in the mud and leveled my flashlight at her face. "What's your name?" She stared at the beam, then closed her eyes. "Emily. Emily who?" I pressed gently. A shudder passed through her, and her head lolled away. I grabbed her arm, rattled it. No response. My breath caught. "Diaz!" I yelled into the darkness. "We need a stretcher now." They were finally moving. I scooped Emily in my arms, cradling her like she was my own daughter, and carried her back through the pipe. Every step I felt her weight, fragile and real, a stark reminder of what we fight to protect. Outside, the troopers and medics formed a human chain, hauling Emily onto a stretcher. A medic checked her vitals, pulse weak but present. I offered my jacket. She didn't answer, eyes closed. Behind me, they sealed the culvert entrance. A placard warned of inspection hazard. I looked back at the hole, shadows shifting within. I wondered how long she'd been down there, trapped in that cold tomb. My radio finally fell silent. I slid up against a traffic cone, breathing hard. Emily was alive. A victory in this endless night. But as dawn broke fully, painting the pines gold, I felt the weight return, heavier than ever. Because for every victim we find, countless stories vanish into darkness. and beneath our feet, stories older and darker than any we chase above ground lie waiting to swallow the next midnight patrol. I stood and stretched, bone-weary. Back in the cruiser, I wiped mud from my boots, tossed the rope back in the trunk. The siren lights faded as the other units cleared. I drove Emily to the hospital myself, lights flashing down the deserted road. Inside, nurses took over, and I watched her pale form slip down the corridor. I wanted to stay, to make sure she was okay, but duty yanked me back out, to the next call, the next dark stretch of road. By 9:30 a.m. I was back in my office, filing reports. My hands still shook slightly as I typed Emily's rescue. When I reached the note about the locket, I paused. I pulled it from evidence bag. A silver heart inscribed EM cold metal glinted in the lamp's glow. I pocketed it. Not mine to log as lost property. A piece of Emily's story, now mine to keep. I looked at the clock. 10:02 a.m. Day shift would be in soon. I grabbed a cup of stale coffee and sipped, bitter as regret. I hadn't even had breakfast. I forced a smile as Lieutenant Harper strode in, sunlight outlining his figure. He nodded. "Good work last night." I nodded back, just doing my job. He glanced at the locket in my hand. "Found something?" "Best we could." I shrugged. "She's alive." He exhaled, relief softening his features. "That's what matters." I offered him the cup. He declined. He turned to leave. "Get some rest, Lawson." I watched him go, then closed my eyes and leaned back. My jaw clenched around a hard truth. Every life saved came at the cost of another left behind in deeper darkness. I rubbed my forehead and thought of Emily's face, the fragility, the fear, but that fleeting hope in her eyes. I slipped the locket into my pocket. My family deserved breakfast, but the next night would come soon enough, and I'd be back on Route 47, on the hunt for monsters that hide in plain sight, kept alive by the very darkness we're sworn to fight. I stood, straightened my uniform, and walked out into the bright hospital corridor. The night's shadows faded behind me, but I carried them in my bones. And somewhere, deep beneath Harrowsfield, something stirred. I climbed back into the cruiser just before dusk settled over Harrowsfield, the sky bruised purple and ash gray. My bones ached from crawling through that pipe, and the cut on my forearm throbbed every time I flexed my wrist. My radio sat silent for the first time in hours, and for a moment I let myself breathe without listening for the next call. But peace never lasts long. As I eased the cruiser onto Main Street, the fluorescent glow of the gas station's canopy flickered in the gathering dark. Earl's Gas and Go had been a fixture since before my parents were born. Now, its pumps rattled in the wind, and the old neon sign buzzed ominously. Free air. I rolled past slowly, scanning for movement. Nothing. Just another empty lot waiting for trouble. I turned onto Mill Road, the narrow two-lane ribbon that led past the old cemetery and the shuttered mill. Gravestones leaned like exhausted sentries, names worn away by time. The mill's brick facade loomed in the distance, broken windows like hollow eyes. I slowed to walk pace. The engine's low rumble was the only life in this stretch. At 7:18 p.m., the call came through, crisp and clipped. Domestic disturbance, 212 North Elm. Neighbor reports raised voices, possible assault. Elm Street was a tidy block of modest homes, porches sagging under the weight of years. The address pinched my throat. 212 was where I grew up, the two-story house with the white picket fence. The same house where, one night when I was 9, I heard my father arguing with my mother until the glass in the living room window shattered. I stabbed the accelerator, tires flinging gravel behind me. I pulled up in front of the old Wilson place. Light spilled from the kitchen window, yellow and choked with smoke. I popped my door and sprinted to the porch, flashlight and pistol drawn. The screen door rattled. I pushed it open with my shoulder. Inside, the floor was strewn with overturned chairs and broken picture frames. The air smelled of cigarettes and regret. A woman lay on the couch, wrists red from thin rope burns. A man stood over her, face slack with fuming anger, a knife glinting in his hand. "Harrow's Field PD," I barked. "Drop it." He froze, shoulders hunched. The knife fell to the floor with a clatter. He staggered backward, control slipping away. I cuffed his wrist, kicked the chair out of his path. He slumped, eyes glassy. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I knelt beside the couch. Her eyes flickered open, young, startled, shadows in the hollows. She nodded, the rope fraying under her skin. I cut her loose, stood and turned to the man. "You're under arrest for assault and domestic violence." He didn't resist, just slumped at my touch. I called for backup and EMS. As I waited, I swept the room again, broken frames, overturned lamps, but I paused on one photo, a family portrait with a little boy clutching a sheriff's badge toy. My breath caught. The boy looked exactly like me at that age. I shook it off. Not my place, not my business. By 7:45 p.m., the couple was separated, statements taken, candles blown out. I stepped onto the porch, night closing in. The wind carried the faint hum of the mill's broken turbines. In the distance, a lone train whistle mourned. I headed back to the cruiser, radio alive again. Possible sighting, unmarked van near Riverbank Bridge. Cameras picked it up at 2030. 2030 was 5 minutes past. I jerked the wheel toward River Road. The bridge arched over the swollen creek, rails rusted, paint peeling like scabs. I edged onto the bridge, headlights slicing through the mist rising off the water. No van, just empty asphalt and the hush of dark water flowing underneath. I peered over the railing. The creek was high, spring thaw, upstream fields flooding. Logs and debris scraped against pilings. I noticed something red caught in the branches of a fallen willow, a strip of cloth. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down the embankment, boots slipping in mud. The cloth was a woman's scarf, silk-patterned, tangled around a branch. Damp, frayed, and streaked with dirt. No blood. Yet my gut twisted. I put on gloves and bagged it. On the bank, fresh tire tracks led back toward town, deep grooves wider than any sedan. I followed the tracks barefoot in the mud, careful not to slip. They curved onto a farm access road I'd never seen before, cutting through knee-high grass toward a dense stand of pines. My radio crackled. "Unit 12, we have a code 4. Suspicious van sighting down at the old quarry. Respond if available." The quarry. Old Jennings' quarry. They say men fell through the ice there in winter. The rocks still smell of damp stone and old blood. I tapped back. On my way. I climbed back to the cruiser, my uniform soaked in creek water and earth. The dash clock read 8:02 p.m. I floored it. The road to the quarry was rough, potholes filled with rainwater blinking under my headlights. The quarry entrance yawned like a cave mouth, chain-link fence dangling loose from one post. I parked and killed the engine. The only light was mine, plus the moon, fat and vengeful overhead. I shouldered my gear, flashlight, cuffs, radio, pistol, and approached the fence. The air was thick with humidity and the stink of stagnant water. The ground beneath was cracked shale and broken glass. I ducked under the fence, feeling the metal graze my scalp. 100 feet in, the quarry opened into a vast pit. Reflective pools of water dotted the floor. The walls jutted up in jagged layers like teeth. My beam landed on tire tracks leading deeper. tracks fresh enough that the rubber hissed in the mud. I followed, careful with each step. Echoes chased me, bouncing off stone. A distant drip, like water leaking onto metal. I flashed my light up the wall, nothing but shadows and angles. Then I saw it. Footprints in the wet shale, boot prints too big for mine. They led to the water's edge, stopped, then continued on a narrow ledge along the rock face, barely wide enough for a foot. My radio buzzed. "Lawson, you copy?" Troopers setting up perimeter. "I copy," I whispered. I edged closer to the prints. The ledge dropped off into deep blue water. Ahead, a dark shape loomed against the rock. A van, half submerged at an angle. Its back doors hung open. I couldn't see inside. I holstered my pistol and drew my flashlight. Step by step, I scaled the ledge until I stood at the van's rear. The floorboards were slick with mud and water. I swung the beam inside. The cargo area was empty except for a low cot and a blanket, damp and muddied. On the cot lay a man's hand, pale, fingers curled. I forced down bile as I reached for the blanket. Underneath, an elderly man trembled, eyes sunken, skeleton thin. "Sir, I'm Deputy Lawson. You're safe now." He lifted his head, hollow cheeks stained with tears. "They said nobody would come." I radioed for EMS, knelt beside him, and wrapped the blanket tighter. Cold seeped through my gloves. The man tried to smile. You found me." "We'll get you out," I told him. As I helped him to his feet, my light caught something on the floorboard. Another scarf, identical to the one by the creek. I knelt, bagged it, heart pounding. Whoever drove this van left a trail, the scarf at the creek, the van abandoned in the quarry. By the time backup arrived, we had the man on a stretcher. I watched them lift him, stretcher banging off rock. My radio crackled. "State police en route. We'll need forensics here." I stood at the quarry's edge, wind rushing up from the pit. The moonlit water shimmered with trapped clouds, as if the sky itself had fallen in. I thought of Emily in the culvert and the woman on Elm Street, and I realized we were dealing with someone meticulous, cruel, and patient. Someone who picked their victims like stones from a creek bed, hiding them in plain sight until they surfaced. The air felt too small. My chest tightened. I glanced down at the quarry floor, empty now, save for footprints and the faint outline of the van's tire tracks dissolving in moonlight. I knelt and set a marker by the first tire impression. Photograph, note, dust for prints. Each detail mattered, because with every piece I logged, I felt the darkness shrinking, and I knew by the weight in my gut that it would never shrink far enough. I stood, back stiff, and surveyed the rock walls. Somewhere up there was a path out, a way back to safety, but down here in the pit, the echoes whispered, "Not yet." My radio crackled. "Unit 12, can you copy?" I keyed the mic. "Copy, I'm here." I took a deep breath and started my careful climb up the shale ledge, every step deliberate, every handhold chosen. Behind me, the quarry floor lay silent, waiting for the next patrol to stumble into its jaws. I eased the cruiser onto Old Mill Road before the sun dipped fully beneath the horizon. The air smelled of wet leaves and engine exhaust, a heady mix that set my teeth on edge. My forearm throbbed from the cut I'd taken crawling through that culvert, and my ribs ached from hauling Emily free. I wanted to hide the ache, tuck it beneath the uniform, but night patrol doesn't allow for weakness. The radio crackled at 9:15 p.m. "Unit 12, we've got multiple reports of lights moving in the cornfield east of Willow Creek. Witnesses describe flashlights bobbing among the stalks." I punched in. "Copy. On my way." Willow Creek Road is a narrow strip of asphalt flanked by endless corn. Fields so tall even on full moon nights you feel swallowed whole. The stalks rustled as I passed, headlights slashing through the dark in jagged lines. I parked at the dead-end turnaround and grabbed my flashlight and sidearm. The beam felt feeble against the black. Stepping into the field, the stalks closed behind me like velvet curtains. My boots crunched over dried husks. I stopped every few paces to listen. Nothing but wind and the distant hum of crickets. Then, faintly, a light flickered ahead, just beyond a bend in the rows. I advanced, scanning in semicircles, every shadow shifting at the edge of sight. The light bobbed again, closer. I called out, "Harrowsfield PD." "Show yourself." No answer. Just a shuffle, then the beam swung wide. I saw a figure in silhouette, tall, arms raised overhead, holding a flashlight like a torch. Something about the stance froze me. I raised my light, a man's face, pale, eyes wide and wild, his lips pulled back in an absurd grin. I holstered my pistol. He looked unarmed and stepped forward. "Sir, are you okay? You're on private property." He didn't speak. He lowered the light, and I saw his hands bound at the wrists with rope, the same frayed type we'd found at Whispering Pines and Elm Street. My pulse spiked. I took another step, and he lurched forward, descending between the rows. "Hey!" I shouted, sprinting after him. The field became a maze of stalks, and I lost sight of him. I stopped, heart pounding, and swept the flashlight overhead. The light caught something on a low leaf, a scrap of silk, red and patterned. I crouched, careful not to step on roots, and picked it up. Another scarf. I stood, calling, "Harrowsfield, PD. It's Deputy Lawson. Come out." Silence. No rustle, no whisper, nothing but the wind. I holstered the flashlight and fished for my radio. The mic crackled, and I heard voices. Trooper Diaz and 2 other units sweeping the field edges. I responded, "I'm near the south boundary. I found another scarf." "Copy," Diaz replied. "We're fanning in." I backtracked to the edge of the field, where the stalks thin into scrub. There, scars of flattened corn, the path he'd taken. I followed the trail, boots slipping on uneven soil. The path led to a small clearing half hidden by a stand of oak saplings. In the center, a circle of stones and broken stalks formed a crude ring around an upturned bucket. My flashlight beam flicked to the ground. Footprints in the mud, half erased. And inside the stone ring, a single Polaroid face down. I crouched, flipped it over with a gloved finger. It showed the man I'd been chasing, but he was shirtless here, chest emaciated, ribs visible like the bars of a cage. Behind him, the van from Jennings' quarry, its back doors open. Behind that, the culvert where Emily had been found. I stood so fast the ground shuddered beneath my boots. I jammed the photo into my pocket and radioed, "I need CSI and K-9 unit here." "Now," Diaz answered. "On it. ETA 5 minutes." I stepped back, watching the autopsy ring in moonlight. I felt the static press of hidden eyes. I flipped on my light and scanned the clearing. Nothing but the echo of corn rustling. My breath hitched. A soft thud behind me. I spun, light skittering across bark. A second later I saw him, shirtless now, standing at the tree line, eyes glinting. His chest heaved. His breathing was slow, measured. I dropped into a ready stance. "Don't move." He tilted his head. The moonlight carved his ribs deeper into shadow. A twisted smile crept over his lips. Then he took a step back into the trees and vanished. I exhaled, radio still in hand. Target fleeing into woods. Voices responded faintly through the trees, troopers moving in. I crouched behind the stone ring, pistol raised. The woods closed in, leaves whispering. I caught sight of him again, just for a second, slipping behind an oak, ripping a scarf in half and tying it around his upper arm. Then he was gone, his grin echoing in my head. The troopers closed in with dogs, their lights sweeping the clearing. I pointed at the corn ring. He was here. Photo and scraps, bag them. They worked quickly, tagging evidence. The Polaroid, the half-scarf, footprints measured and cast. I watched, uneasy, the wind whispering through the corn like a slow exhale. When they finally called it clear, I gathered my things. I'd logged the evidence in my mind already. Polaroid showing emaciation and location. Repeated scarves tying incidents together. His deliberate appearances, as if he wanted me to chase him across midnight landscapes. I drove back through the field, now a dark sea of rustling green, buzzing with cicadas in the warmth of early summer night. The air shifted to cooler as the cruiser rolled onto pavement. I flicked the headlights off, letting the moon guide me. Back at the station, I processed the report until past midnight. My eyes stung from the overhead fluorescence. When I finally shut down the computer, my reflection stared back. Haunted, 14-hour shifts etched under heavy lids. I shut off the desk lamp, and the room plunged into darkness. I turned on the radio one last time. Silence. I checked my gear, reloaded magazines, polished the badge with the sleeve of my shirt. Every piece would be ready. In the mirror, I caught the flash of movement behind me. I spun. Empty bunk room, uniforms hanging in lockers, a flicker of moonlight through the window. I exhaled, unsteady. This wasn't just a series of calls. It was a game, one I'd been sucked into. He picked the fields, the barns, the culverts, the quarry, made every location a stage. He'd been there, waiting, tied victims there, left clues to taunt me. I rubbed my temples and whispered to the empty room, "You want to play?" Fine. I strode down the hall to the roll call board, stared at my next shift assignment. Midnight to 6 a.m., 6 nights straight. I pinned a Polaroid of the cornfield clearing beside my badge on the board. Underneath, I wrote in marker, "Find him." Outside, the station yard was quiet, the air thick with the promise of another hunt. I stepped into the night, boots clicking on pavement, flashlight and radio and pistol at the ready. Because somewhere in the shadows, he was waiting. And I was coming for him.